Life stories often teach us profound lessons about acceptance, love, and the pursuit of our own path. In today's story, we explore the journey of a woman who spent years being excluded from her family's narrative, only to find success on her own terms. This is a tale of self-discovery, resilience, and the difficult but necessary act of setting boundaries with those we love. Join us as we follow her journey to find her worth, not through others' eyes, but through her own. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to begin today's story. My name is Emma Taylor. For 7 long years, I was deliberately excluded from every family portrait. It wasn't that I didn't exist in those moments, it was just that my success, or rather, my lack of it, was too much of a discomfort for my parents to handle. They would crop me out of holiday photos, ask me to take the pictures at family reunions, and even when I stood in the background, I felt like I wasn't really there at all. I remember one year in particular. As the family gathered around the tree for our Christmas photo, my mother, immaculate as always in her tailored dress, turned to me and said, "Emma, stand aside. This picture is for the holiday card, and we want to feature your brother's promotion." It stung more than I cared to admit. As the years passed, the pattern became clearer. I had chosen a path that, to them, didn't fit into their definition of success. I was an aspiring writer, and in my parents' eyes, writing was just a hobby, something to do when you had nothing better to pursue. Unlike my siblings, who had attended prestigious universities and then moved seamlessly into high-paying careers, I was told to be practical, to get a real job. When I chose to pursue writing instead of joining my father's business, I became the one who wasn't taken seriously. There was always an unspoken air of disappointment surrounding my career choices. At family gatherings, the conversation would always return to my younger sister's achievements or my brother's rapid rise in the family business. My father, a successful businessman, had grand plans for them, plans I wasn't part of. Emma, my sister, had just announced her engagement to a cardiothoracic surgeon, and my parents couldn't wait to show off her future wedding plans. Daniel, my brother, had just made junior partner at our father's investment firm after only 4 years. A meteoric rise that even my mother couldn't deny was aided by our family connections. Meanwhile, I worked in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Focusing on my writing, I poured my heart into my novels. Staying up late, waking up early, driven not by external validation but by something deeper. There was a certain peace I found in writing, in creating worlds from nothing but my imagination. When I finally published my debut novel, The Winter Station, I kept it a secret from my family. I knew how they would react. They would dismiss it as another one of my hobbies or creative pursuits. So, I used a pen name, O.J. Winters, not because I was ashamed, but because it offered me the freedom to exist without the weight of my family's expectations hanging over me. My first novel was met with critical acclaim, though my family remained unaware that O.J. Winters was, in fact, me. It wasn't until I received an email that changed everything. It was a simple invitation, but I could feel the weight of it as soon as I read it. Family dinner this Saturday at 7. Mom's making your favorite coconut curry. Important news to share. Please come. I froze as a familiar tension crept up my spine. Family dinners had never been just that, dinners. There was always something to prove. Always an unspoken competition for approval. The last, important news, had been Emma's engagement, followed by my parents' attempt to one-up themselves at the neighborhood potluck. I was hesitant, yet, something made me respond. "I'll be there," I texted back, pushing aside my reservations, knowing deep down that this was an opportunity I couldn't ignore. My phone buzzed again just moments later. It was Daniel. "Olivia. Wear something nice, okay? Dad's invited the Richardsons too." I paused. The mention of the Richardsons immediately set off alarm bells. The Richardsons were our family friends, prominent figures in the social scene. Their presence suggested this dinner was about more than just family, it was about performance. And for the first time, I was being invited to participate in the performance. I tried to focus on the task at hand, editing my second novel, The Silent Season. The story was about a woman uncovering her family's secrets. An eerie parallel to my own life. Yet, even as I immersed myself in my work, I knew that this dinner would be the turning point. What would happen when my family finally realized I had succeeded on my own terms? Would they finally see me for who I was? Or would they only recognize me because my success now fit into their narrative? This question lingered in my mind as I prepared for the dinner. It wasn't just about food or family, it was about recognition, acceptance, and the years of hurt that came with my exclusion. I had to face the truth. My family's love had always been conditional. It was a painful realization. But it was also the beginning of something new. The dinner would force me to confront my family's perception of me and, more importantly, confront the way I had been measuring my own worth all these years. Saturday evening arrived, and with it, the familiar tension that came with every family gathering. The house on the North Shore, where I had spent much of my childhood, stood in front of me, grand and immaculate as always. It was a symbol of my father's success, tall, pristine, and unyielding in its perfection. The circular driveway was already lined with cars, Emma's Lexus, Daniel's Tesla, and, of course, the Richardsons' Mercedes. The sight of these cars, parked so perfectly, reminded me of the family's obsession with outward appearances. Nothing could ever be out of place. Not even in our gatherings. I took a deep breath, adjusting the emerald jumpsuit I had chosen for the evening. It wasn't the conservative blue dress Daniel had suggested. It was bold, different, and for the first time in a long while, it felt like an expression of who I truly was. The idea of wearing something that wasn't pre-approved by my family felt like a small but necessary act of defiance. My hands trembled slightly as I walked up to the door, knowing what lay behind it. I wasn't just about to confront my family's ideas of success. I was about to confront my own emotions, my own history, and the painful years of exclusion. My mother opened the door with her usual flawless smile, the kind that could easily mask anything beneath the surface. But tonight, I noticed a small crack in that perfect exterior. She looked me up and down, taking in the jumpsuit with a slightly tight-lipped smile. "Olivia, darling, you're here," she said, her voice pleasant but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Everyone's in the living room." I followed her through the entryway, past the formal dining room, to the living room where my father was standing by the fireplace, deep in conversation with James Richardson. His tall figure cut a commanding presence, his posture perfect, exuding the confidence of a man who had mastered every room he entered. As I stepped further into the room, my presence seemed to shift the air. Conversations paused, heads turned, eyes assessed. I was suddenly the subject of scrutiny, the one who had been absent for so long but was now front and center. "Olivia's here," my mother announced, her voice a little too loud, as if to cover up the awkwardness. My father set down his drink and gave me one of those practiced smiles, the kind he reserved for moments like this when he needed to maintain control over the room. "There's my oldest," he said, as if I had been lost and then found again. His voice carried a strange note of approval, as though my presence was a symbol of something more, perhaps the family's success, perhaps my own. I gave him a small hug and took in the familiar scent of coconut curry. "The curry smells amazing," I said, trying to sound normal, despite the turmoil inside me. My mind was still racing. What was this dinner really about? What was this important news they had been so eager to share with me? The dinner proceeded with the usual family dynamics. My father dominated the conversation. As always, he spoke of business trends, of market movements, of all the things that made him the unquestioned patriarch of this family. My mother ensured everyone had a drink in hand, making sure the plates were passed around. Emma and her fiancé, Anthony, shared stories about their wedding plans, as if everything about their lives was polished and perfect. Daniel, as usual, chimed in with his business insights, looking every bit the professional, the successful son. And me? I sat there, listening, contributing when directly addressed but watching as the conversation moved quickly away from anything I shared. My mention of a writers' conference was quickly overshadowed by Emma's latest charity gala. And when I complimented the curry, my father immediately launched into a story about a restaurant he had visited on a recent business trip. It wasn't until dessert, my mother's signature panna cotta, that the real purpose of the evening came to light. My father set down his spoon and cleared his throat, the room falling into an almost reverent silence. "I'm sure you're all wondering why we've gathered for this special dinner," he began. His eyes swept the room, landing with particular emphasis on Emma and Daniel. "We've built something remarkable over the years," he said, "and now, as we look toward the future, I've been thinking about succession planning and ensuring that what we've built continues to grow with the next generation." At this point, I felt my stomach tighten. I had suspected this would be about business, but hearing it spoken so openly, in front of everyone, brought a sharp clarity to the situation. I was never meant to be part of this plan. Not truly. My father's gaze deliberately avoided me as he announced Daniel would be promoted to senior partner, the first step toward becoming CEO. A polite round of applause echoed around the table, and I could almost feel the weight of the decision settling in. Emma was next. But it wasn't just about business. There was something more to this moment. "We're creating a new position of Director of Client Relations," my father continued, "and Emma will be taking it after her wedding in September." And then, the moment I had been dreading arrived. "We'll be doing a photo shoot for the campaign next month," my father said, his voice shifting to a more businesslike tone. "I'll need you to clear your schedule for May 15th. Olivia." I froze. The room fell silent. Eyes shifted toward me. Suddenly, after 7 years of being systematically excluded, I was being asked, no, instructed, to participate in something that felt more like a corporate branding exercise than a family portrait. I couldn't keep quiet anymore. "May I ask why I'm being included in the company photos when I've never worked for Chen Investments?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with disbelief. My mother's fork clattered against her plate, her eyes flashing with discomfort. "Olivia," she said with a forced lightness, "this is about family, not just business." "Is it?" I asked quietly, because the family photos taken in this house for the past 7 years would suggest otherwise. The room grew colder. My father's expression hardened. The truth had been laid bare, and I had no intention of letting them sweep it under the rug anymore. The room grew even quieter as my words hung in the air. I could feel the discomfort, the silent shift in dynamics. For years, I had accepted the position of the family outsider, the one who was never quite enough to be included in the family's narrative of success. But tonight, something had changed. I wasn't the same person who had walked in through that door. I wasn't asking for approval anymore. I was standing up for the recognition I had always deserved. Not based on external validation, but because of who I was. My father shifted in his seat, his brow furrowed in a mix of confusion and frustration. He had always believed in clear definitions of success, measurable, observable. It was his world, and I had never fit into it. For the first time, I realized how deep those boundaries ran. I had always measured my worth against their expectations, hoping that someday they would see me the way I saw myself. But in that moment, I knew that I had to stop waiting for them to acknowledge me in a way that was never coming. My worth wasn't tied to their approval, and it never should have been. "Olivia, you've always had a choice," my father said, his voice steady, though I could hear the edge beneath the words. "You chose to pursue this writing thing instead of joining the family business. We respected that, but now we're trying to include you." I could feel the familiar sting of dismissal in his tone. The same tone he had used all those years ago when he had laughed off my dreams of being a writer. "You respected my choice?" I echoed, the bitterness rising in my throat. "If you respected my choice, then why have I been erased from every family photograph? Why have my accomplishments been ignored, while Emma's wedding and Daniel's promotions were plastered all over the walls?" My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes cast downward. For once, there was no defensive reply, no attempt to redirect the conversation. I could feel her discomfort, her shame, But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to let them off the hook because they were finally recognizing my success now that it could benefit them. I leaned forward, steadying myself before I spoke. I'll participate in the photo shoot. But not because of your business campaign. I'll do it on my own terms. For me, not because you want to use my success to sell a brand. I'm not just a prop to complete a family portrait. The silence in the room deepened. The realization that I wasn't going to conform to their narratives seemed to sink in. I could see it in their eyes, confusion, frustration, and perhaps even a glimmer of understanding. But I couldn't stop there. I had to make it clear that I wasn't doing this for them. And there's one more thing. I continued, my voice firm. I want you to acknowledge the past. The years of exclusion. The way my accomplishments were sidelined because they didn't fit into the family's definition of success. No more pretending that it didn't happen. If I'm going to be part of this family's story, it has to be real. Not just a sanitized version that fits your image. My father's face was unreadable now. His earlier impatience giving way to something more thoughtful. Even vulnerable. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being seen for who I was. Not just for what I could do for the family's image. I have never questioned your value, Olivia, my father said quietly, his voice softer than usual. I always thought I was guiding you toward security. Toward a stable life. I never understood how much my definition of success hurt you. I had heard his words before, justifications. Rationalizations for his actions. But this time, it felt different. This time, I felt the weight of his self-awareness. It was as if the barriers had cracked just enough to let something new in. Something more honest. I didn't need him to apologize for all the years of hurt. What I needed was for him to see me for who I truly was. Beyond his own limitations. Beyond his own measures of success. We've been talking about a new approach to family photography. My father added, after a long pause. Not for public consumption. Not for business. Just for us. Something real. I blinked, taken aback. The idea of a family portrait that wasn't tied to a performance was foreign to me. It felt like a dream. A possibility I had long given up on. But there it was. A glimmer of something new. A family portrait. Not because of what we had achieved. But because of who we were. Together. As a family. I nodded slowly. Still processing. I think I'd like that. I said quietly. For the first time acknowledging the possibility of something real. Something authentic. Something that didn't require me to fit into a predefined role. As the evening wore on, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The tension had not entirely dissolved. But it had shifted. We were not quite there yet. But we were starting to move in the right direction. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for my family to validate me. I had validated myself. Through my writing. Through my work. Through my boundaries. And that was the only recognition I truly needed. As I left the dinner that evening, the city skyline shimmering in the distance, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. For so long, I had carried the weight of feeling invisible in my own family. Constantly seeking validation where I thought it was missing. But in that moment, something had shifted. My family hadn't suddenly become perfect. And we weren't all miraculously aligned in our views. But for the first time, there was a glimmer of honesty, a recognition of how far we had come and how much we still had to learn. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It wasn't about proving them wrong or claiming a victory over them. It was about understanding that I had already defined my worth. The years I spent building my career, writing books, and pursuing my passion had shown me that validation doesn't always come from the places we expect. I had earned my success on my own terms. And now, I had to accept that it was enough. Regardless of anyone else's recognition. As I sat down at my desk that night, preparing for my upcoming New York Times interview, I realized that this story, my story, was still being written. It wasn't the ending I had once dreamed of, where everything fell into place and my family saw me for the first time. But it was a new beginning. One where I would no longer measure my success by their standards, but by my own. And that, I realized, was the greatest achievement of all. If this story resonated with you, Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring life stories. The journey of self-discovery and the pursuit of authenticity is one we all share. Stay tuned for more.